Hi, everyone. It's Dorothy. I wanted to give you an update on my latest venture. It's called Markets and Miles 49. It's going to be a podcast, and ultimately, I'll have a blog to go with it. So, I just wanted to give you a little background as to what I'll be covering. I retired recently after 49 years in banking, and I worked at many banks along the way, including Commonwealth Federal, Meridian Bank, which was my big break, Core States for a short time. I worked as a consultant at Eastern Mortgage. I worked at Progress Bank, First Federal of Bucks County, and through a merger, we became Penn Community Bank. And I retired in November of 23. Along the way, I had to deal with investments, the financial markets. I wrote a newsletter on the economy, and I considered myself an analyst. And I also studied the Federal Reserve very extensively. But along the way, partway through that, in about 2011, I started some military research on my uncle Stephen Jaworski, who was a soldier in World War II and was killed in action in France in September 1944. So I researched and discovered a lot of what happened to him. I traced his service up through September and ultimately wrote a book about him called Just Another Good Soldier. I did a follow-up book to show some of the things that happened after I wrote that book. I also wrote a book about Nick Baska, who was a football star in Phoenixville, and he also played for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was killed in action also in France in November of 1944. So I wrote a book about him. I also wrote a book about my nephew's wife's two grandfathers, Lauren Voorhees and Robert Recurl. Both of them served in World War II, one in Europe and one in the Navy in the Pacific. Fortunately, both of them came home, survived the war, and went on to have beautiful families. So I'll talk about them a little bit. I'm also currently now working on a book about my career, and I hope that it's done by the end of this year. About 12 years ago, also, we started traveling a lot, and most of it has been in Europe. um, 6 different Viking River cruises, and I went with family and friends on those, and we had a fantastic time. So at some point, we'll be talking about those. And we also met through my writing of the book about my Uncle Stephen, some wonderful people in France, Elizabeth and Alain Gazo, and their organization, Thanks GIs, the people of Noviant and the officials there, and many of the French people that are, friends of theirs. So, we have a strong connection with them. So I'd like to sometime have a few of them on to talk. I've met amazing people throughout my career, and I hope to meet a lot more amazing people. I'm sure there's a lot of topics that, might not relate to some of this, but I'll cover that as well. So the podcast will be called Markets and Miles 49, and it'll be starting up this June of 2025. And I'll probably also do a blog to go along with that. So stay tuned for that. And I appreciate your support. Thank you very much.